This story begins with the emperor coming to the palace grounds and seeing some girl being held hostage. These people did not expect to see him so early and were afraid of his appearance. But the emperor immediately asked what they were doing here and why the girl was sitting on her knees. Those people said they received orders from the empress to arrest the Crimson Rose family, so they just follow their order and are forced to deliver this girl to the empress. At that moment, the girl looked at the emperor and noticed what beautiful eyes he had, like a winter wind, because they were very light blue in color and seemed to glow a little. You could look at it constantly without taking your eyes off, because it is truly mesmerizing. The emperor was angry that they destroyed the whole estate in order to catch her, and they justified this by saying that they wanted to find their mother and brother who were hiding. It was very funny and stupid to hear, because people couldn't hide behind a vase or a photograph, the emperor said, and he didn't understand why it was necessary to spoil all the property for the sake of this. But no one gave clear answers. They were just ashamed of their act. The emperor then ordered them to return to continue looking for them, and the girl said that he would take care of himself personally, to which he received dissatisfaction due to the fact that they received an order from the empress not to transfer criminals to anyone, as if everyone forgot that the word of the empress is lower and not as important as the decision of the emperor. He actually asked about this. Does anyone really think that the empress is higher in status than the emperor? And because of her you can argue with his majesty. So everyone was silent because they could not answer anything. After this, the emperor ordered his assistant to help the lady, namely to take her to the doctor so that in case of injury he would help her, after what was done to her. But for some reason the emperor very often looked at this girl, as it turns out later, not at all just like that. She does not even suspect what he can then offer her. Meanwhile, the girl is already in the presence of a doctor, and she is being properly checked for bodily injuries or some other injuries. Fortunately, there were no fractures and nothing serious happened. At the time when the doctor was doing all the necessary examinations, he could not understand how those people could do this to a girl. They are not some kind of street gangsters, and she doesn't look like the villain who deserves this treatment. But then he found out that the girl defended herself well and defeated almost everyone. Because of this, they were afraid and were forced to make sure that she could not hurt them. And all because she was really good with a sword and almost managed to defeat everyone, but did not have time. At that moment the girl thought she looked ungrateful. She thought that the doctor noticed her bad mood and might be offended because of it. But it was hard for her to express gratitude and seem nice. After what happened, she hoped that she would just be understood and not perceived as ungrateful. But everything turned out to be completely different. The doctor understood that she was a good girl and warned that he would come to her soon. So he has to leave. But who was he talking about? Who is he? Couldn't understand the lady. This made her even more worried, because it seemed to her that everyone here was opposed to her, and it's impossible to prove anything to anyone. But she was wrong. There is a person in this palace who is not like everyone else, who can treat truly good people with all his heart and care despite his status. When suddenly the girl heard that someone addressed her by name and is already approaching her, this person, she definitely did not expect to see then. It was Duke Postenmeyer. He came to talk to her in person. And for her, of course, it was pleasant on the one hand, but on the other, it is not known for what purpose he came. And it became a little scary, because it is not known what can be expected from this conversation. The first thing he asked if she knew him or not. Girls heard people call him Your Highness, and knew that he was Emperor Duke Melchior Postenmeyer. After that, he told what he knew about her, and asked if this information was correct, that she was 18 years old. She had a mother and a younger brother. During the conversation, they were sitting at the table and drinking tea. The emperor asked if she had any other relatives, besides him. But she did not quite understand why he needed to know this. The emperor began to ask if she has any sisters, maybe cousins or who are similar to her. All these questions were very strange, but it turns out that he was asking, and that it was a girl. But she was still. It is not clear what he is talking about and why he is interested in this. She even thought that he might like girls with pink hair and green eyes, because these traits are typical of her family. Then asked what it had to do with the fact that she was detained because of the games her father played. She reminded about it, and he remembered that for this, he came to talk. However, today, the girl destroyed 20 blue knights of the Empress, and according to the testimony of the knights, She handled it like a true professional and was able to single-handedly defeat almost all opponents. The girl said that it was only self-defense. She was just defending herself in this way, and is not to blame for some of her father's affairs. Also does not understand what right they had to arrest her for her father's tricks. The only way was to prove her innocence, just to defend herself, because otherwise she would simply be taken hostage. And all because they simply did not want to listen to her, but simply followed the order of the Empress, without understanding if she had anything to do with it or not. No one wanted to believe her words. Even the Duke doubted her for a while, and said it sounded absurd, and doesn't she get it? At the same time, he was surprised how skillfully, having no knightly skills, she so skillfully coped with the Blue Knights alone. To which she replied, "Does the Emperor really think that it was very difficult? And he himself never defeated a crowd of knights alone?" But he didn't know what to answer and just kept silent, continuing to be surprised that this girl could be special, and also the fact that she is ready to prove her case and innocence to the end. At some point, the Emperor asked her if she knew why the Blue Knights of the Empress came to her estate in the first place. She said that maybe because her father plays money games, they want to punish him because of this, as well as his family. And since there must be a reason why they could take it seriously, therefore the Empress sent knights to plunder them, but then thought about it, because it seemed to her that they did not come for her family. And at that moment, the Emperor asked what she was thinking about. But she hasn't told him anything yet, although she must have been thinking about something. But if she knew why the Emperor asked about her sisters or relatives, she would not be at all surprised at this strange conversation. Suddenly, he told her not to think about any escapes until she came to the right decision, which he would be waiting for. These were the next words of the Emperor, which the girl did not know how to understand, and could only guess what he meant. He did not even answer the question, and went somewhere. On the way he was met by an assistant, one of the knights, and said that the younger brother of Her Majesty the Empress had arrived. And at this time the girl decided to just not bother and enjoy freedom, because the Emperor will probably explain everything in more detail soon. Meanwhile, his assistant comes to the Emperor and wants to talk about something. He apologized for coming unannounced as this conversation is very urgent. But the Emperor was not quite in the mood for some kind of conversation, especially on a serious topic, and nevertheless agreed to discuss what the assistant came for. It turns out that he heard that the Emperor protects the daughter of Crimson Rose, and believes that this should not be done since she is also guilty of her father's actions, and asks to punish her for this. The Emperor could not understand where they got the idea that the girl was involved in the actions of her father, for which he should be responsible himself, and not his daughter. And why is everyone so eager to punish her for this, just because she is his relative? And nevertheless said that she was under his care due to her injuries, and asked why he should hand her over to someone, because it is not known how she will be treated, because he knows how badly everyone is disposed towards her, except for himself. If he gives her away, it will be worse for her, because everyone wants to arrest her and deprive her of freedom, without first finding out her guilt. The only adequate person who understood that it was impossible to punish people without understanding the situation to the end was the Emperor, and he won't let someone bully her if she's not to blame. Besides, he had a personal interest in her, which he had not yet told anyone about. But the assistant still tries to convince the Emperor, and insists that the girl should at least be sent to court. Then everyone will understand that she is a villain. But he decided that he would not give her to anyone until there was at least some evidence that she had done something bad. His assistant was very angry and demanded to punish the girl, when suddenly the Emperor says something strange. Rosalind Criminrose, whom they are looking for, his wife. This information just shocked his assistant because he didn't expect to hear this, and thought maybe he was just joking. After all, he simply did not imagine them together as husband and wife, just wondering how it will all end and whether the girl will agree to it. Because the Emperor is well aware that the girl is not aware of what he just said to the assistant, and it all can disperse and turn into constant gossip and talk about this. At this time, the girl has a dream, and she enjoys moral peace and protection from the Emperor. After all, if he protects her, this is an absolute guarantee of her safety, because no one dares to do what is contrary to the decisions of the Emperor. In a dream, it seemed to her that someone was addressing her, and she did not understand whose voice she heard. Because of this, she was very frightened, and began to look around. Who was calling her? This voice said that he would definitely protect her, You just need to wait a bit. And gradually she starts to wake up and understand that it was a dream, although it seemed as realistic as possible. But she wondered what that voice was because she had never heard it before, and he was very unfamiliar. At that moment, someone knocked on her room and asked if everything was all right, because he heard some loud scream from her room. Several hours passed. The girl was sitting in some room, and I don't understand why I brought her here, because he did not return for several days after the interrogation. At that moment, the doctor spoke to her and said that she was in a very difficult situation. Also spoke about the fact that some person from the Empress recently came and asked to transfer the lady to him for further proceedings. But the Duke did not agree, and left her under his control. After that, the girl thought about why the Duke should help her, because there was no reason for this, and why he needed it. It was not clear. So the Duke went to His Majesty, the most important emperor. There was no one more important than him. His name is Balthazar. He is the emperor of the empire. And the Duke who came to him, his name is Melchior, to whom the emperor was very pleased. After that, the emperor said that if he said that he already had someone, he would still give his permission, regardless of the girl's origin. But what is he talking about? After that, he asked the Duke why he made a contract and kept it a secret from him. Although he knew that this marriage required approval from the emperor, the Duke sincerely apologized and said that he had reasons for this. But the emperor said that nothing could be a reason not to ask his permission, and they talked about it for a very long time, since the Duke really did not ask the emperor for permission to marry. In addition, the Duke said that he could not get permission from her father, since the girl was underage. She'll be 18 soon, but she's only 17 at the moment, so her father has to give his consent for them to get married. This information shocked the emperor, and he did not understand how best to act in this situation, and also started talking about how the Duke promised to wait for her to come of age, without even telling her that they were already almost married, and kept it a secret. After that he asked for what? Is it really to protect her? Then this act is truly chivalrous and deserves respect. And also said that he understands why the Duke decided to hide all this, but was surprised, because he thought the Duke would be a bachelor for the rest of his life. Melchior apologized for what he did and tried to explain that it was really important to him, but the emperor said that he understands him perfectly and accepts any of his decisions, because he remembers how the Duke saved the Empress 6 years ago, and to this day I am extremely grateful to him for this. And yet the Duke hopes that he will get approval for the marriage, but for now he asked permission to leave. Their conversation was rather ambiguous, but the Duke was saved by the fact that they had good relations with the emperor, and he treated him way better than he could. The emperor even himself understood that he should have been much stricter with him, but he could not afford this. Meanwhile, the girl is sitting in the same room with her doctor and assistant, therefore constantly looking for someone named Rosalind. Whether this is true or not is not yet clear. But this information is quite interesting, and it was unexpected to find out about this. That's all the girl could be told about the Duke. It turns out that he was looking for someone from his memory. He even took this investigation to find her and protect her without giving it to anyone. But why then does he not tell her anything? And what the girl is left to do in such a situation is also unknown. At this moment comes to them and says that she needs to sign some document. He didn't even ask if she agreed to it or not. All she managed to find out what kind of document it is. The Duke said it was a prenuptial agreement and a lot of other things. Everyone was shocked by this news, because they did not think that they would witness such an event. But the girl was no less surprised, and immediately began to read the conditions. It was written only that the emperor gave consent to this marriage, between a girl and a duke, is all that she managed to read for now. And even from that she almost fainted. What is most surprising is that the Duke actually put her before the fact, before that he did not even discuss his plans, which actually concern her too. Did he really show his disrespect for her opinion by such an act? And consent? But maybe he just forgot because everything had to be done very quickly. The only thing he said is that he will decide all the fines and charges, since from now on her relatives are, and his relatives. Only now she asked if it seemed strange to him that they were getting married and did not know each other at all. But he explained this by saying that he was doing this for her salvation. His assistants at the back at the time thought he might be a little crazy and didn't know what he was doing, and nevertheless reminded the girl that if she did not marry him, she would get worse, because she could be sent to where she would be without freedom, for the rest of her life. And he is the only one who took care of this and did something useful for her, ensuring safety and a good later life. But he still hasn't told the real reason. He just says that he just wants to save her, and that's the only reason he takes her as his wife. Of course, it all looks like a fake marriage and has nothing to do with true love at all. And at some point she decided to show him the information she found out about and asked if he was really doing this because she looked like the person he was looking for. Of course, he did not expect that she knew about it and said not to talk nonsense. But it was clear that he was nervous. He immediately realized that his assistant and the knight had told her this, looked at them, and not just looked away. The girl asked them not to punish them because there is nothing wrong with that. The Duke began to noticeably get nervous and turned the subject to another conversation. And yet the girl asked why he didn't tell her anything, because she was alone for a whole week, knowing nothing. But the Duke said that he could not talk to her about it in advance, because first he had to consult with the Emperor, because without his permission there would be no point in even discussing this topic with her. Even though she was put in front of the fact, she agreed to sign the contract, after which the Duke said that it was a good decision. But she had only one condition. Without it she would not sign anything. After that everyone listened to her attentively, because it was interesting what was important to her before signing and agreeing to the contract. Her request was very strange. She asked to fight her first. But what does she need? What if she really hurts him, or he does her? What then? And yet the Duke agrees to her terms because he had no other option. And during this he asked why it was important to her, because she could ask for anything. But in fact she did not want to give him a chance, and said that since a lot of time had passed, she sat in the room alone and could not go out. It was terribly crowded and it was impossible to move normally. And since they are getting married, it would be nice to tell about yourself. The girl hoped that this excuse would work. He did not understand anything from her words, but pretended to understand what she was talking about, and told her to do whatever she wanted, as long as she eventually agreed to marry him. In response, the girl thanked the Duke, and he asked to be called from now on only by his first name. It will be much more harmonious and correct. After all, they are future newlyweds. Only here's what to expect from this fight. Did the girl really think she could compete with the Duke on equals? And what she wants to achieve with this, only she herself knows, because her actions are a little strange and incomprehensible. It was probably nothing more than a game for the Duke, and he took it all as a joke, but at some point everything went wrong. Apparently someone did not improve their capabilities. Girl didn't expect Duke to put some kind of block, although it is unclear which of them was wrong. She thought he would be much stronger because of his physique. If he couldn't block, she would hurt him. In response, he said that he thought she would be stronger, but she asked him if he thought he would regret his words now. Turns out she hasn't shown her best yet, and said that it would hurt a little, so maybe already give up. She very rarely jumped, which he did not expect at all. At the moment, he became very scared, because he did not think that she was really still able to withstand the duel. In his eyes, one could see great fear, because she did everything very abruptly, and it was clear that she had been doing this for a very long time. And he shouldn't have relaxed, because you should never underestimate your opponent, and even more so, tell him that you are offensive before the fight. This could end very badly, but he decided to stop it. And what did he do? Have you really decided to take it seriously? Actually, he just caught her and threw his swords aside. He held her in his arms, and she did not expect that everything would happen like this. At this time, he asked to stop proving that she is strong. He was already convinced of this, and immediately looked at her closely, and made sure that she was the same as his first love. But the girl asked to let her go because she was uncomfortable at that moment. Of course, she looked at his eyes in exactly the same way, and admired his handsome face and especially his eyes. It was hard to tear yourself away from looking at it since they were very close. It was hard to keep a look at the station. After that, he began to ask where she learned all this technique. But since she was self-taught, she said that she did not study anywhere. Everything she did was a matter of practice. But at that moment, he just looked at her for a very long time and could not say anything. And she was not happy with this, and asked to be released as soon as possible, since this is the first time they've been so close to each other. After the Duke let her go, she decided to just leave, perhaps because she was a little worried, and did not want to seem like a stupid girl in love. Although this did not stop him, he himself looked at her in the same way, and was not shy of his desires. After this conversation, the girl left to walk and think about what happened and what she agreed to, because she does not know if she will be happy with this person and if she will enjoy being here, because she really did not want to connect her life with a man who proposes a fictitious marriage. After all, like everyone else, she really wanted to really fall in love with someone and marry her loved one, and could never imagine that the first husband would turn out to be not the one she truly loves. But you still need to make the right choice. Maybe sometimes it's better to do what you need to do, and not how you want. She has very little time for this, although her subsequent life depends on this decision, and it is not clear whether she will be happy or not. While she was looking at all the beauty around the palace, various thoughts came to her, related to the fact that this rose garden is located in the backyard of the mansion, and she never thought it was so big. Therefore, you need to visit here more often. There is really a magical atmosphere around. When suddenly the girl heard a scream. It was a male voice, and he asked for help. She definitely heard someone shouting nearby, "This person obviously needs help and you can't pass by." It turns out 3 guys did not want to let go of a friend and kept him near a tree. They wanted him to steal in the professor's office and forced him to do it, convinced that no one would think that it was he who did it, and did not want to let go until he agreed. Said that he had no choice, and he was obliged to listen to them, although this situation was unfair, because there were 3 of them, and he was alone. The boy continued to stand his ground, and said that he did not need it. He was not going to do what they need. They just took it as a joke and laughed in response. But they still don't know that they will have to answer for their behavior, because you can't force an innocent person to do something in this way, and threaten if he doesn't agree. But they still don't know that justice will soon be left for you and everyone will get what they deserve. One of them even tried to hit him because the guy just didn't want to do what they asked. This boy was very scared because he was alone, and there was no one around who could save him. All these guys behaved inappropriately and thought that it was in the right of someone to force someone to do something. But at that moment something interfered with them, and they were seriously scared because they did not expect that someone could not interfere. They immediately began to look around and see who could do it, because they expected to see some big man there who decided to stand up for the boy. They finally experienced hopelessness, like the one they just bullied, and understood what it feels like when you are bullied by those who are stronger. The guys no longer knew where the stones were flying from and who was throwing them. Everything looked like some kind of magic because they didn't see anyone around. The girl hid well behind a tree, out of hopelessness, so as not to seem like frightened boys and weak, defenseless creatures. They decided to shout stones and pretend that they would punish him now for this, when suddenly a stone flew right past the face of one of them, and he thought that some kind of magic was actually happening, and an invisible force was making fun of them. It all looked very incomprehensible and scary, but for a while they tried not to show it as if nothing was happening. When the stone was stuck in the village, they imagined how strong this blow was, and it is good that the stone did not hit one of them. After that, they immediately began to run away and say that the guy was just lucky, although they themselves were running like little children from the villain, whom they were very frightened of and were afraid to see. But the boy was much smarter than them, and realized that someone was just hiding to protect him, and after getting up, thanked that person for helping, and said that he would like to see him personally and thank him, and asked his savior to come out. Only he didn't expect at all that it would turn out to be a nice girl, and not some kind of man. And at that moment, she did not expect that someone could notice her, because she tried to change her location on purpose when she threw stones, and was surprised that he noticed her. And besides, there were too many trees in the forest. This guy is really good at navigating and has good eyesight. After that, she went out and they started to get to know each other. The girl immediately asked if he didn't like him and if everything was okay. He said that thanks to her, everything is fine with him, and once again sincerely thanked for the help, although she just couldn't watch how these 3 thought they were the ones who could order someone, because they just took advantage of the fact that there were 3 of them, and they are a little older, and had to learn not to see the sequel. Because it's so unfair, they acted like little boys who decided to scare less than their age, which did not have a chance to escape. And still he did not stop thanking, because he did not even hope that someone could help him in the situation. He already resigned himself to the fact that something might possibly hit him. After that, he introduced himself, said that his name was Julian. He would learn in the 3rd year of the Imperial Academy, and wanted to know the name of his savior. But the girl continued to claim that it was too much to call her a savior, because she did nothing of the sort. Then she thought that it would be time to say her name. Only now she thought to say her real or future surname, because this is very important. But I decided just not to lie, and not to say the last name at all. After all, the name will be quite enough. Said you could just call her by her first name, Rosalind. At this moment the guy smiled. He liked her name very much, probably because it is the name of the person, because of which he is now safe. But Rosalind once again asked not to say anything more about her salvation, because she really did not do anything special, as she believes. But she just wasn't in that guy's place, and underestimated her act. And yet this guy said that now he is obliged to help her if necessary, and said that she can always turn to him for help. Although in reality he can't do anything, and he understood it perfectly. But despite this, he had to say it, because he thought that he was smart, could not bring much benefit, but still wanted to somehow be useful. The girl really appreciated these words. She was pleased to hear it. After that, Rosalind thought it would be good if innocent children, who are kind and sincere, could no longer be hurt by anyone, and they were not endangered, because she really doesn't like it when this happens. Why did the guy have to go somewhere? And he said goodbye to the girl. In addition, it was also time for her. But first she had to find the right road, because she does not fully remember what is around, and which way to go, because she doesn't know how to navigate at all. And it will take her much more time than any other person. To quickly find a way out in this situation, she will not be able to, so it will take quite a lot of time. And at the same time, it is advisable not to get lost because the garden is quite huge, and it is very easy to get lost there. After some time, she came across the roses she saw at the entrance to the forest, so she immediately realized that she was not so far away as she thought. She was very lucky that she went on the right path, because she could get lost for several hours due to the huge territory of the garden, from which even people who have been here for a long time, it is also sometimes very difficult to get out. Meanwhile, she is already entering the palace, and she wondered if Melchior's wound had been treated. During this time, while she was gone, at the entrance, she saw the Duke and did not know what he would say to her now, because she really had been in the forest for a very long time, and he did not know where the girl was. The first thing he said was that she was late, and he could not figure out where she had gone. He should have been warned about this. In response, she first asked about his shoulder, and then said that he had nothing to worry about. Everything was fine with her. She just walked around the garden and enjoyed the atmosphere around. The Duke said that he already feels much better, and since the wound is not deep, everything will heal very quickly. And since the Duke has a wound because of her, she asked for forgiveness several times, because she is very embarrassed for having harmed him, and he is now forced to be treated. He certainly understood that he had never had such a thing, and the girl was able to hurt him in the competition. But this only gives even more motivation to work on himself and become stronger. He does not blame her for anything, since he himself agreed and said offensive things to her, as if she did not know whom she called as an opponent. But she was embarrassed to realize that she acted like a child, offering to compete, and this probably looked very stupid of her. And she is completely sure that it was not necessary to behave like that, because now, because of her, the Duke is forced to take care of himself and be under the supervision of doctors. And instead of being grateful then for her salvation, she began to set conditions for a fight. Only now she realizes that she looks very ungrateful after what he did for her. Therefore, from now on, she needs to be more grateful. She certainly understood this, and she will not allow such behavior from her side again. And just in case, she once again decided to apologize for her act, because she's already beginning to understand how much the Duke did for her, although she did not initially understand this. After that, she said that she would sign everything and agreed to any of his conditions, since she really appreciates his help. He should not have helped like that at all. Therefore, you should always remain grateful and remember his kindness. But it seems that he is not as upset as she is. Perhaps this is due to the fact that the girl really appreciates someone's help, and she is very sorry that she seemed ungrateful in his eyes. At that moment, she decided to read the terms of the contract again, and still thought about signing it, and thought about whether life would get better after that, because in fact, this decision can completely change her future. In any case, there is no choice anymore, and it doesn't look like she will feel bad with the Duke, because at the moment there hasn't been any bad situation that is associated with him. He treats her quite well, and never gave reason to doubt the safety, and if she would stay and live with him. So basically she was sure she wouldn't regret it, and the Duke can be trusted. He doesn't seem like the kind of person who would hurt or offend her. And at some point she remembers the bonus that the Duke said, or rather that he will be able to pay all the debts of her family, and they will no longer owe anything to anyone. Was a very good deed. On his part, it may not be very difficult for him, but for the girl and her family, it is a great help, and they will be grateful to him for this all their lives. In the meantime, this news spread throughout the palace. Everyone was discussing it, even those who had nothing to do with it. Aides of the Duke were the first to talk about it, because they never imagined that the Duke would marry this girl. They did not miss the opportunity to discuss it while they are alone, because this is really a huge event, but no one understands why he chose her. After all, there were a lot of other girls who could suit his status, and no one could understand what he found special in her. Because from the outside, one might get the impression that her status is not such that one can count on marrying a duke. But one of them was sure that they should not be discussed. After all, this choice concerns only them. No one else has the right to judge whether it is right or not, because only they will have to live with each other, and only they have the right to decide who it will be, besides who they are. To doubt his choice, and it was absolutely right. They perfectly understood that they did not dare to get into their personal lives. Only here is another one. He couldn't understand the choice of the Duke. He could pick himself up, a girl who would be much better and suited him in status. Meanwhile, the Duke and his beloved are discussing their future life so that there will be no misunderstandings in the future. They decided that it would be better to agree on everything at the beginning. Although he offered her to become his bride, he still cannot get used to the fact that this girl will soon become a mistress, and his lawful wife. The next day she decided to go up to him and ask for something. She wanted to learn the family business, but he didn't understand what she meant. Is she really interested in it, and wants to be a part of it? But it was important for her to learn everything, starting with what a wife should do, since she is not going to sit idle and just be as a wife. The Duke said that she can do absolutely anything she wants. The main thing is, just put his fame before doing anything. It looks like he trusts her too much. But there was another question. She did not know at all who to turn to. Who could teach her this? And her husband immediately replied that no one needs to learn anything from anyone. Just do whatever she wants and not create unnecessary problems. In addition, he asked if she had not been taught anything at the academy. He thought that she already had some skills. Rosalind said that there was only theoretical knowledge, and it differs from practical skills. The Duke was sure that knowledge would come to her as a result, and she should not worry about it so much, and advised her to start with what she likes, and if problems arise, they can solve them together. It turns out that she will have to learn from her own mistakes, but she was very grateful that the Duke gives her complete freedom and supports everything that she wants to do. It was very important and pleasant for her. The only thing she was worried about was that she might cause problems with his status, and this could somehow negatively affect his authority. Besides, the position of his family can be shaken if she makes a mistake, and this did not give her peace of mind. She was very worried about this, but promised to try very hard and not let him down. Of course, you will have to offer a lot of effort in order not to make a single mistake, because now she can't afford to damage the Duke's reputation. Just one mistake can have dire consequences, and in order to live up to the status of his family, he will have to try hard because it is very difficult. She already understands this very well, but the most surprising and pleasant thing is the words of the Duke. He said that it's okay if she makes a mistake and there will be some kind of trouble. He loves her anyway, and will always be able to protect and help. After these words, she understood why the people who serve him are so devoted to their Duke. All because he is a very good man, and to achieve such success he put a lot of effort. In addition, he's a very strong person who can always come to the rescue and support anyone. Whatever the status of this person, the Duke understands that any person deserves support and help. And at some point she decided to ask him something that I have been very interested in lately. She asked if he was still looking for the girl he cherishes with the same looks and name as hers. He replied that he had long ago stopped looking for her, because he thinks that it is useless, even though it's his first love and he would really like it. The Duke said that she was not the first love, to which the girl asked, Did he really not like her? Although it was clear from his face that he was telling a lie. He talked about how that girl was his teacher, and it was still clear that he continued to tell lies. She perfectly understood and saw it, only for what he was doing it. It was not clear. Maybe that girl was more than just a friend to him. Then why is he lying to Rosalind? This topic is probably unpleasant for him. He would not want to remember it and talk about it. When suddenly Rosalind told that she wants to change her name, it is very unpleasant for her that when he addresses her, he can think of another. The Duke definitely did not expect this, and did not think that she could be unpleasant. So she asked to give her some new name that he can call her, and she will not resemble his ex, a completely different girlfriend. After these words, he thought very hard, because he could not even imagine that there was some kind of problem in this. While Rosalind was waiting for some answer from him, she realized that this conversation had become very strange, and also the fact that she is just a replacement for someone, and if you change the name, maybe he will no longer need her, because she will not look like her. But he changed his mind about the new option. What can it be called? And said that he would call her Rosalind, because in the East, her name is pronounced that way. And since they sound almost the same, nothing much will change, and you won't have to get used to the new name. Everything became even more confusing. It was already difficult to understand who really wants what, but it seemed to her that in any case it would be better to have a different name anyway. There is no choice anymore. And despite the fact that she does not like something, she remains grateful to him for his help, despite the fact that he may never love her, and everything may remain forever. Meanwhile, it was in the palace of the Empress. She was told the news that the Duke was taking a wife to an unknown girl. She could not understand how this happened, and what the Duke was thinking when he asked her to marry him. But most of all, she was surprised that the Emperor gave his consent to this. And she was definitely against it, but so far she hasn't told anyone about it, in order to come up with some kind of plan, because in her opinion, they should not be together. She would like to say a girl, but she understood that this was almost impossible, because the Duke was constantly watching her and being nearby. Because of this, everything is much more complicated, and they wanted to achieve their goal despite this, but that's what they need it for, and what they don't like about being together. Is it because of this that they have some problems or troubles? But so far it was clear that the Empress was unhappy with this, but she does not explain the reason to anyone, and is very angry because of this, and her assistants also suffer from this. Although in fact they have nothing to do with it at all, the Empress simply releases her anger on them. After this news, she could not find a place for herself and calm down. Her main problem was that she couldn't get back her power that the Emperor had given her a long time ago. She always hoped that her strength would someday return, but she has been waiting for this for a very long time, and nothing happens, which means that he transferred power to his receiver. The gift was presented to her by His Majesty the Emperor, and how can she say that she lost it and it was taken away? Meanwhile, Rosalind decided to find out more information about the family she now belongs to, in order to better understand their history and some information, because this is very important. It may be possible to learn something new and unusual. And fortunately, the family archives were rewritten separately, so it will be much more convenient to study what is written there. This will help to understand what is happening with the conduct of affairs in the family. She thought that there might not be any records here, because this is a capital estate. So as the Duchess is the Duke's deputy, she must do her job well. When she opened the first book, she saw a photograph of the Duke, and there was a lot of information about him that she might not know. For example, that he became the head of the family due to the competition of heirs to the throne, which involved both the direct line of a relative and the sidelines. It took him a year to receive the title. This means that he didn't have much time to be on good terms with his relatives, because his parents died early, and he had to live in a hostel where no one cared for him. And it turned out that they have a similar past. She is very familiar with everything that the Duke had to endure. To meet a mentor or a friend in such a situation, now she understands how important this person will be. But couldn't find one, even taking advantage of the Duke's position. Maybe he's no longer in this world. That's why he decided to marry her so easily. But then she realized it didn't mean he had feelings for her and forced herself to calm down with these thoughts. And she has no reason to get into the Duke's past, let alone be jealous of him. And even if he has a relationship with someone other than her, when suddenly some assistant comes to her and says that her mother and younger brother have arrived, and they really want to see her right now. She definitely didn't expect to be able to see her relatives so soon, and she didn't think the Duke would release them so quickly. It certainly was a very joyful event, but she understood that it was only thanks to him, and she would have to thank him properly for such a noble deed. When her mother and brother came up, they talked about how the Duke saved them. But the girl knew everything, and expected that everything would be fine soon and she would be able to see them. But most of all, she could not imagine that he would tell them that they are now husband and wife. And now I am mom and brother know everything. The woman was very happy for her daughter, and could not believe that she had now become a duchess. It was a real miracle for her, and the most joyful news. It was impossible to imagine how happy her mother was for her, and sincerely congratulated her on this, because for their family this is a real event, and it was impossible to treat it as something ordinary. Only now they did not know some points, for example, that this is not all for love. They have the usual agreement and contract, and only she and the Duke knew it. They thought that it was better not to tell anyone about this, because there is a high probability that they will be able to tell this secret to someone, and there will be no point in the contract anymore. And because of that, it's better to stick to a fictional love story. It's better for everyone, and you don't have to constantly worry about it. But despite all the good news, Rosalind said that all they now have is something like temporary conveniences and comfort. So support from the Duke implies some kind of gratitude or help in the future for all this. Of course, her mother understood this and agrees that one should be grateful for this. At some point, a girl asked her mom if they shouldn't do something to get back the money that was spent on them to pay for all the debts. Woman, she was sure that the Duke would not even remember this money, because for him, it was most likely the little things that he did in order for her daughter to agree to marry him, and you shouldn't think about it yet, because he himself offered such help, and probably doesn't assume that someday they will be able to give him this money. It looks like her mother just doesn't want to believe that everything will have to be paid someday, even if everything seems to be fine now, and there's no need to worry about the future and the problems that may arise. She even told her daughter that she had no right to act like this with the mother who gave her life, and should not put her opinion above others, after she is in the status of a duchess. Rosalind could not explain that this was not what it might seem from the outside, because she could see better what was really happening. But then she began to understand that it was useless to prove something to her mother. She was not going to listen to anyone and change her mind. From that moment on, a big conflict began between them, due to the fact that her mother did not listen to her daughter and considered her stupid, explaining this by the fact that Rosalind is in a luxurious palace, and because of this she dares to doubt the words of her mother. But she did not even think that perhaps her daughter could better see how to act in this situation, and a woman has no right to indicate what is best for her daughter to do, because she has nothing to do with this and has no right to manage someone's life. At this moment, she simply believes that her daughter imagines that now she cannot listen to her mother and do stupid things, believing that she is right. The woman even said that the Duke chose the girl only because she had no relationships with guys before. Otherwise, she is absolutely ordinary and is no different from the rest, thereby humiliating her daughter very much, without even understanding how with these words, she made her hurt and unpleasant. This is all due to the fact that the woman always considered her daughter stupid and not mature enough. Rosalind didn't understand how she could tell her like that, and how her mother could know how to do it better, because she gives advice so boldly, and Rosalind will have to be responsible for the consequences. At this point, the girl decided to speak up and say everything she had ever disliked, such as the fact that her mother never paid attention to her, and was never interested in her affairs. She even had to not go to her birthday just because her mother was sorry for a gift of money. And she never thought that the girl in her childhood was a completely lonely child without girlfriends and toys. And what right does she now have to tell her daughter how to continue her life, if earlier she did not even try to take an interest in her problems and experiences? And it wasn't until after she married the Duke that her mother suddenly appeared, and in doing so began to give advice that no one had asked for. So she is wrong now. You should have spent more time with your child and take care that he had a happy childhood, instead of yelling at him now as an adult and dictating her own rules, which she no longer has the right to do. Rosalind still communicates surprisingly normally with her, although she could not let her into the palace at all, and refused to communicate after what she had to endure as a child. But her mother absolutely does not understand this, and continues to make everyone guilty except herself. After that, the girl said that all she could do was make sure that her brother lived comfortably in this mansion, and give him the most happy childhood that she didn't have because her mother didn't worry about it. And since the girl doesn't owe her anything, there's no reason to care about her anymore, because she doesn't deserve it. But this woman started to resent and say that she has a say in everything that happens in this mansion, since she is her mother. Instead of enduring these screams once again, she simply asked her to leave the palace and never appear here again. She doesn't want to endure this anymore. She already had enough bad memories in her childhood, and she won't allow this in her adult life. Meanwhile, the Duke came to the Emperor about the ceremony, and said that after the death of the girl's father, it is not clear how best to proceed, to arrange a ceremony or not. The Emperor said that it must be hard for her after the loss of her father, and it is hard to make a choice about the celebration. And it will be very difficult to decide because she may misunderstand something and be forever offended about this. We'll have to think carefully and analyze all the pros and cons of holding a wedding after such an event in the girl's family. But the Emperor still insisted on celebrating weddings at least in a small circle of people, and not as loudly as it would be under normal circumstances. This advice was very important to him since the Duke always listened and heeded the opinion of the Emperor, even if sometimes he did not agree with it, because he really knows what he's talking about and has a lot of life experience to give advice. The idea of doing everything in a simplified way is probably a good one, and it's worth thinking about. Although they plan to celebrate this event very brightly and make it as memorable as possible, there is no other choice. After all, no one knew that such an unpleasant situation would happen in Rosalind's family, and it's not her fault. Only now they have to cancel a bright and big celebration, because it would be ugly of them to celebrate the wedding in such a difficult period. When he went to his room, he noticed that she was standing on the balcony and thinking about something. She was definitely worried about something. Because of this, she could not rest and sleep. When he came closer, she noticed him and looked in his direction. It was clear that she was upset about something, and someone offended her. Of course he couldn't pass by, and probably wanted to support her and listen to what happened to her, because she looked very sad. He had never seen her like that before. Despite the fact that he only took Rosalind as a wife by contract, and seemed to have no feelings for her, he still worried about her, and wanted to know what happened. The first thing he did was ask why she was standing here and feeling sad. You can see from her that something unpleasant had happened. He wanted to find out about her problems as soon as possible, and try to help in some way. But she replied that she just wanted to run away in the middle of the night. It was, of course, a joke, and the Duke understood it. She did not look like a person who was tired of being here with him and living together. He knew that the problem was something else. The girl explained that she just wanted to take a walk and get some fresh air. But so far, she did not say what happened to her and about the conversation with her mother, after which she feels a little unpleasant. So he decided to stay with her, since it's already quite dark outside, and it won't be safe for her to be alone, so he'd better accompany her. After he got a little closer, noticed that she had red eyes. I realized that she had just been crying. But she didn't want to tell anything and complain about her problems, because he helped her in so many ways, and she didn't want to create any more problems for him. But he came up to her, looked straight into her eyes, and said that she should tell him about everything that worries her, because he wants her to be happy being with him. Since he is her husband, she did not expect to hear these words at all. She was very pleased that he was sincerely interested in her problems and about what was happening with her relatives. He was ready to listen to her and do everything so that she would no longer be sad, no longer stand alone at night with these problems and bad thoughts. It seems that he is not saying something about his feelings, and Rosalind at that moment realized that maybe he was starting to like her, and he was looking at her as a future real wife, and soon it would become true love, and not some kind of contract to avoid punishment. He always showed that for him, this girl is not just some kind of replacement for his ex. Every day he proves the opposite, that he truly falls in love with her. But so far, he has not shown or said this. After that, they went for a walk in the garden. It was very atmospheric, and there was a pleasant aroma of flowers that grew around. Only now they noticed that it was completely untidy. It was time to finally hire a gardener. And at that moment, he remembered that he had to tell her something about the wedding. He related that the emperor had said that if there were no special reasons for canceling the ceremony, it should take place. So he thought to have an abbreviated wedding ceremony. Girl asked how this wedding will be different from what it could be, bright, large-scale, and fun. The Duke said that it would be enough just to exchange words and call the priest. And since her family arrived, she might want to call one of them. Of course she understood that she did not want to see her mother at such a holiday. She spoiled her mood for a long time anyway. But the Duke does not yet know this. And with these words he upset the girl even more. Only now she did not know how to say it. When he looked at her, he noticed that she didn't like something, and thought maybe she didn't want to and was against the wedding. But he was wrong. The matter is completely different. And then he thought he might have disappointed her by changing his mind, and said that she did not have to do this at all. If she did not want to, he could discuss this topic with the Emperor again. But the girl replied that you should not worry about this, as well as the fact that everything is in order, and she is ready for this. She offered to do so. After that she asked how his wound was, because she could not forgive herself for having injured him recently. It seems he completely forgot about it, and did not understand what she meant. Then said that it's actually okay, her shoulder is fine and she doesn't have to worry about it anymore. At that moment, he did not think in any way that she would take an interest in his health. After all, she had many problems, and how she even remembered it was amazing. Although she has many personal problems, she never forgets to ask how he is doing. In this, they are very similar to each other. And despite the fact that they are often afraid to say something superfluous, each of them is well aware that they already treat each other in a completely different way than it was at the beginning, although so far they are hiding it, and try to talk about general topics like shoulder. Despite the fact that they are on good terms, the girl still feels embarrassed. She is uncomfortable because the Duke does too much for her. But the fact is that she is simply not used to someone caring about her, as well as what is trying to help her, or is interested in her affairs. Because in her childhood she did not have this, and she is used to being unnecessary to anyone. Since he still had her red eyes, the Duke began to think that he had done something wrong, and could not understand what was the matter, because she did not explain what happened, and began to look for some of his actions that could offend her, for example, coming home too late, or not doing something for her, which might have been important for her. And from not understanding the situation, it is already starting to annoy him, because he is tired of seeing a girl without a mood, because she does not say anything, and does not want to do this. No matter how much he is interested in her, she does not tell him anything. Perhaps again due to the fact that she just got used to not sharing her problems with anyone in childhood. With her behavior, she very confused the Duke. He no longer understands whether this is a problem in her or not. He doesn't even know what to say to her now, and is afraid to say something superfluous. He even began to control his every step and word, in order to understand that he was definitely doing everything right. And she was not upset because of him. He really wanted to make sure of this. All this time they were just silent, and at some point the girl asked, "Come back." Maybe she already wants to rest and not think about bad thoughts. But it's not clear that with this request she can make the Duke understand. After all, he already perceives every word differently than she had in mind. Because of this, he also becomes nervous. If she said everything as it is, these problems might not have happened. And Duke long ago had already offered his help and solved this problem. Since he never leaves anyone in trouble and is always happy to help, no matter how difficult the situation happens. After all, the fact that they have not said a single word in the last few minutes is, of course, strange. From the outside, it all looked like they had a fight and didn't want to talk to each other. And the problem is that they wanted to understand what was in each other's thoughts, and at the same time they did not tell wow. It turns out some kind of vicious circle. Do not say anything, and at the same time they are trying to understand what one of them is thinking now. They are really some kind of strange. All that can help her is to talk more about herself and her experiences. Meanwhile, the Emperor came to the Empress, but for some reason she did not want to open the door for him, just stood behind her and was silent, all the time while he was talking to her and standing outside the door. The operator tried to say that because of the terrible hot summer air, it is very difficult for him to wait for her until she opens the door. And she nevertheless decided to listen to him, only here it was not clear why she ignored him, but still opened the doors because she couldn't keep the Emperor waiting for her for so long. Suddenly, for some reason, she said that she was not worthy of his majesty. and it's still very hard to understand why they act so strange. She ignores him on the one hand, and on the other says that she is not worthy to be near him. They seem to have something to talk about, only it is very difficult for them to start this conversation. And for a while they just sat and said nothing to each other in order to get used to the atmosphere, and the atmosphere became more comfortable. At some point this woman asked why the emperor sat next to him and asked him to sit opposite. He answered, or that he really needed her warmth. At the same time, he took her hands and looked directly into her eyes, but she told me to go to another couch before she kicked him out right now. After a while, it becomes clear that she is offended by the emperor for something. And a little later it turned out that this was due to the fact that the girl's family was freed. And also she didn't like the fact that he makes all the decisions, and she can't influence anything if she doesn't agree with something. But he asked him to forgive, because it is very important for him to remain on good terms with her, and he would not like more than anything that she hated him. And since he had not seen her for 10 days, he could not sleep. Without her by his side, he felt very bad, and even asked to see how thin his face was. And she turned away on purpose and said that she didn't see anything. It looks like the emperor was a kind enough person, because he remained calm enough after her behavior in his direction. This shows that he loves her a lot, and can't afford to be rude or respond in the same tone as her. She is very lucky that he is such a kind person, because the way she behaves, she deserves a completely different treatment for it. The emperor keeps saying that he really wants to make peace with her, despite the fact that she is very offended and is ready to wait as long as he wants. If only she would forgive him as a result and no longer be offended, because it is really very important to him. He will never forgive himself if his woman is upset about something because of him. In order to prevent this from happening, he is ready for anything, even if you have to wait a very long time, and a good mood was more important to him than pride. Meanwhile, the girl was sitting in her office and thinking about all the problems that she had lately. But most of all, she was worried that the Duke might remain in a bad mood for her too, because she was very sad and almost talked to them. At this moment, the butler comes to her. He greeted her and said that there is one news. He was very polite and gave the impression of a well-mannered and intelligent person who can take a walk, which is why he is in the status of the butler of this house. It turns out that the girl's mother really wants to see her and talk about something, to which Rosalind asked me to tell her that she does not want to see her. After that, the butler said and advised her to leave her mother to live here for a while, because she is still not a stranger, and there are enough rooms here, and enough for everyone, and when her house is completed, they can immediately go back and live there. And since they have nowhere to live, you need to enter into their position and help, especially since they can do it. He tried in every possible way to convince that you still need to forget about your grievances and take care of safety and housing for your mother, although he had no right to say this because he does not know the situation that happened. And for the girl, it seemed that he allowed himself too much. He did not know at all how her mother treated her all her childhood, and that she had the right to treat her like that in adulthood. When suddenly she asked when the selection of new staff was completed. It happened yesterday, but for some reason she was not informed about the recruitment of new servants. But he did not quite understand what she meant. The girl said that yesterday she received an ID card and recommended letters and asked and be sure to take them with you. But what does she mean? She had people's resumes on her desk, and she said they fit and were perfect. And after that, she even praised the butler for picking such good people. But it wasn't that easy. She didn't like something, and she asked to send these 3 people back, which is very strange because she just praised these candidates. The butler didn't understand what was going on because she was saying some strange things. Besides, they all signed the contract and were supposed to go to work today. But Rosalind, who could approve them for work if she is the mistress of this family, and asked with whom they could then conclude some kind of contract if not with her. But since they had already arrived, she asked them to bring them to her in order to check them in person. Whereupon the butler asked if he could find out the reason for this decision. It turns out that the first falsified his story, the second one indicated false information in the same way, and the third is no different from them, in his words. In the same way, there was a lie, which he indicated in his resume. But despite her words, the butler kept insisting that all the CVs were real, and the information in them was verified so they could be trusted. And from that moment on, the girl doubted that the butler could be trusted at all, since these 3 people are somehow suspicious, just like himself. but this still needs to be checked personally.